I'm Trish.
And I'm Brandy.
And you're listening to episode 8 of
Connected Conversations. This is your space where international teachers, school leaders, and parents like us get together for real talk, real tips, and real conversations that go beyond the glossy brochures of international education.
Between us, Brandy and I have been doing this international school life for nearly 40 years across 4 continents and in 8 countries, and in countless types of schools. Not just as educators, but as parents ourselves.
That's right. And whether you're moving abroad for the first time, you're already part of the international school community, or you're just weighing a big decision about your child's future, we know that question can keep you up at night.
So if you've ever wondered what really makes a great international school for your child, this is for families. Beyond those Instagram feeds and the shiny campus tours, you're in the right place.
Today's episode is part of our International Files series, where we unpack the systems and logistics of international life, moving, and working abroad. Last time, in episode 7, we unpacked what makes a great international school for educators.
And this time, we're flipping the lens to focus on families. Because as moms ourselves, we know from our own experiences that your priorities are different. You want to know, will my child be safe? Will they be supported? Will this school set them up for the future?
We'll cover everything from student well-being and language support to curriculum recognition, class sizes, accreditation, community culture, and how to judge it all before you enroll.
All right, let's get started and let's get connected. Let's start with what's probably the number one concern for any parent, your child's well-being and safety.
And it's funny because we've been behind the scenes, and it's safe to say that there are definitely schools out there that get so wrapped up in the academics, they forget that parents, for the most part, they just want their kid to be happy.
That's right, and here's the thing. Every school says they care about children, and you'll see it plastered across their mission statement or across their website. We put children first and we nurture the whole child. But the difference is whether they can actually show you what that looks like in practice.
Schools should be able to discuss with you in length and with clarity about the systems they use and the multi-level as well as multi-staff support that they provide. When you're on the school tour or in that first meeting, don't just settle for the catchy language and general statements. Don't be afraid to dig deep and be specific in your inquiry.
You can ask, who is your designated safeguarding lead? And if you're not used to that term, it basically means who is the staff member responsible for child safety and well-being? Other great questions are, what systems do you have in place if my child is struggling emotionally or socially? And how do you identify if my child is struggling?
And if you get a vague answer like, oh, all of our teachers look after well-being here, it probably means there's no clear accountability. Or if they say something like, we deal with things case by case, well, that can be code for we don't actually have a system and we just react when things go wrong.
That's right. And on the other hand, the clear answer that they might say is that they've shown you that they've got real systems. They might say like, our child protection lead is Mrs. Ahmed, and she's trained throughout Cognia, and here's how parents or students can report a concern to her. We also have a counselor who checks in weekly with new arrivals, and that tells you they built structures, they've trained their staff, and actually they know how to protect children.
Another huge part of well-being, and one that parents ask about constantly, is bullying. And it doesn't always look like the stereotypical big kid cornering somebody at recess. More often in the international school setting, it shows up with kids that have too much energy. They can be rough, loud, or unsupervised. And some children, they end up feeling unsafe or excluded. When schools are upfront about their anti-bullying policy and how it's enforced, that's a huge green light for parents.
So that's why it's so important to look past the impressive facilities and really watch the atmosphere of the school. When you walk through the hallways, always, pay attention. Do students seem comfortable and confident? Are they loud? Are they aggressive? Or are they left unchecked? On the other end of the spectrum, are they quiet? Are they withdrawn? Are they nervous? Like both extremes can tell you something about the supervision and the support systems in place.
Take a look and see if you see things like a visible counseling office. You can see if there's approachable staff who interact positively with kids. Look for students who seem relaxed but respectful. A red flag is when you see groups running wild without adults nearby, or you see staff who look the other way instead of stepping in, or just simply areas where there's no adult to be seen.
Yeah, we've both seen schools where bullying is taken seriously and dealt with really quickly. For example, one school I worked at had a super clear system. If an incident was reported, a counselor met with the students both within 24 hours. The teacher followed up with the parents. The principal checked in a week later. It just wasn't a punishment. It was supported. It was accountable and making sure it didn't happen again, Like it's a growth opportunity for students. So you could feel the trust in that community because kids knew adults would step in.
Yeah. But on the flip side, I once visited a school when I asked about bullying, the head of the school smiled and said, "Oh, we don't really have bullying here." That's a major red flag. Every school has bullying issues at some point. And, the difference is whether they admit to it and they have procedures in place to react to it or prevent it. Pretending it doesn't happen usually means that kids are suffering in silence or the school just isn't addressing issues with transparency and consistency.
Yeah, for sure. And another red flag is when there's no documented system or policy on dealing with bullying or behaviors. Parents, you have every right to not only ask what these systems are, but ask for a copy of these policies. Many schools are listing them on their websites nowadays. And if there is nothing to hand over, it's a huge red flag.
Definitely. And sometimes, I hate to see it, but if you do get to see a policy, it might only exist on paper. We've seen schools with zero tolerance posters all over the hallway, but when you actually talked to students, they said that no one followed up with when their problems were reported. Yeah. And that gap between policy and practice is what families should watch out for. But unfortunately, you won't really know that part until you're a member of the school community.
Right. And things can always change. Okay.
That's true.
You can help the change happen.
That's true.
Remember, safeguarding also covers things like background checks for staff, visitor policies, visible school badges, digital safety. Don't be shy about asking, how do you monitor online student use, for tech? And how do you ensure staff are vetted? These questions might feel awkward, but strong schools can answer them openly and confidently.
And at the end of the day, you want your child in a school where well-being isn't just a poster on the wall. It needs to be lived daily. And every adult not only feels responsible for it, but can clearly and confidently describe it when talking with you.
Love that. The second big worry for families is language.
What if your child doesn't speak English yet? Or what if you've moved countries a few times and your kids are juggling 3 languages already?
Right. Like our kids sometimes.
I know.
Okay. We've both seen families panic about this, and it's understandably so. But there's good news. Good schools have systems to catch kids who are new to a language and help them integrate really quickly.
I remember my first time working with first, second, and third grade EAL students. That stands for English as an Additional Language. And they needed heavy English support. And although I had a TEFL background and I had some experience, I wasn't quite sure how the timeline for integration back into the regular classroom was going to work. But dear families, there is hope, especially for those younger ones. Kids are like little sponges and their brains soak up so much information. Those first, second, and third graders that I taught, they all transitioned back into their normal classrooms within 2 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And, now that I have more experience under my belt, I'd say it usually takes a student about 1 to 2 years to acquire the level of English to integrate back. The biggest thing is if they are fully immersed or as immersed as they can be in English as possible. And that being said, there also has to be good EAL support or an EAL department.
Right. And part of the research I did with my master's degree 25 years ago had to do with like how those children's brains are connected and had exactly the idea that you said, before the ages of 9 to 10, students really have incredible interconnectivity between the 2 hemispheres of their brains. And research shows that the more exposure children have to a variety of things before this age, they can actually retain more neural pathways connecting the 2 sides. That tends to die out around 9 to 10. So this is why early learning education and exposure to so many things is so important. Okay. So short story here, your child will quickly learn. They will quickly grow and adapt to the new language if you expose them to it.
One thing to listen for is whether they mention push-in support. That means that EAL teachers actually go into the classroom and they co-teach alongside the main teacher. If all you hear is pull out, where a student is coming out of the classroom, that can be fine, but it also risks that your child is missing science or math while they're just drilling vocabulary.
Right. And if they do it right, like EAL curriculum should line up with the regular curriculum pretty seamlessly. So instead of your child practicing random worksheets in the language, they're learning the words they need to succeed in that class that's happening back there without them. So they will learn the words needed for the unit on volcanoes, or perhaps the maths and the fraction words, and they won't fall behind in content.
Right. And when you're taking that school tour, don't panic if you don't see big, bold EAL support signs everywhere. Peeking into a class for 10 seconds isn't long enough to get the full picture. If you're unsure, just ask. For example, I worked at schools where the majority of the kids already spoke English, so you wouldn't see a whole EAL department or bilingual posters in the classroom. But the support was still there when students needed it.
And that being said, most of the larger international schools I've worked at have had an EAL department that parents could visit and get a feel for it right away. So
definitely. Yeah. So a really useful question for you, regardless of the size of your school, is what tools are given to EAL learners to help them be independent in the classroom? Strong answers might include adapted lesson materials, personal word banks, additional staff support, or topic vocabulary lists sent home before a unit starts. Those give kids a way in without isolating them from the rest of the class.
And here's a word of caution. Okay, be careful if the school leans too heavily on translation apps or bilingual aids. Okay, This can be helpful for the settling in process, but if they're the main strategy, kids often rely on their first language instead of building confidence in English or the target language. It's about immersion.
Absolutely. If you've got 90% of things being translated, that's a red flag. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's also a red flag where kids are clearly struggling and they're just left to figure it out.
We've both been in schools where the EAL teacher just popped in once a week and new arrivals were a bit lost the rest of the time. That's a big nope.
No.
Another good angle to be clear about is how does the school involve parents in language learning?
Oh, that's a really good point. Strong schools will say things like, we run workshops to give parents tips for building language at home, or they might send resources in your home language. Weak schools might just shrug and say, oh, you can watch English TV at home and the language will come.
Yeah, and let's be real, like anyone who's ever tried to learn a new language, no, it doesn't just come. Osmosis of Czech is not working for me. Okay, I mean, Brandy, how many years did it take you to feel confident of just ordering coffee in Czech without panicking?
Well, I couldn't even get the sentence, do you speak English right when I needed it? So don't ask me.
Do you speak Czech?
No, well, that's what I said, but I wanted to say, do you speak English?
Episode 2.
Go to episode 2. The story's ridiculous. But the point is that the schools that involve you as a partner in the process, they're showing that they take language seriously as well as have systems to check in with you about that progress.
Yeah. So what should you take away regarding EAL or local language integration support? Parents, look for dedicated staff, look for push-in support, look for alignment with the real curriculum and the way that parents are brought in as allies.
And if it feels like your child is being thrown into the deep end, trust your gut and keep going.
That's right. Next up, curriculum. Every school loves to advertise IB, British, American, or a blend of the best. But here's the catch. The label doesn't guarantee quality.
No, and for families, what really matters is 2 things. First, will this curriculum transfer smoothly if you move again? And secondly, will universities recognize it when your child graduates? Because at the end of the day, none of us want our kids doing 2 years of algebra only to find out it doesn't count in their new school.
I wouldn't wish that on an enemy. And tucked in there is another piece. Is the curriculum actually being delivered the way it's meant to be, or is it just a logo on the website? Let's start with the early years up through middle school. I've seen schools claim IB, which is inquiry-based, but in practice, there are still too many worksheets and units are too prescriptive to adhere to the actual philosophical core of the IB and what it truly is. Or I've seen schools calling themselves British, but assessments are inconsistent and expectations keep shifting. And the British factor really just comes in with that extra O and the U and the spelling, and and British core values here and there. So yeah, often these schools just weren't accredited yet, or these things will change once the accrediting team comes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because, just saying that you're something, but not, and not having the stamp on it, that's not curriculum. We call that branding. Yeah. Another thing to listen for, though, is consistency between your levels. You need to ask, how does your early years program connect into primary, or how do you prepare students to transition between the stages? A good school will be able to walk you through the transition pathway that they've already laid out for student success.
Right. And when you ask that, listen for the specifics in their answers. Do they mention the actual skills or assessments that they carry forward, like phonics programs, math benchmarks, or checkpoint exams? That's a reassuring sign that there's a structured pathway.
Yeah. And instead, if the answer sounds vague, like, oh, kids adapt when the time comes, or there's vastly different skills that are mentioned, different materials or assessments that are changing from one year to the next. Those are warning bells. It usually means that there isn't a clear system and your child could face gaps or sudden jumps between stages.
Yeah. And so that means pay attention to whether they use consistent language across the stages. For example, if the same reading framework or assessment style is mentioned in both early years and then again in primary, that should make your ears perk up, because it means that students aren't consistently adjusting to new systems.
Yeah. And parents, don't worry if you don't know all the acronyms. It's hard for us too. Just listen for clarity. If the school can show you how one stage clearly flows into the next, that's a green light. Another thing to note is that you might come across a school that blends systems or curricula, and not all of those are disaster schools. I can definitely say from experience, I've worked in some of these smaller mishmash schools, and it has its challenges, but it's also had some real positives.
Definitely. Some of those schools can create really warm, close-knit communities and can be really flexible for kids who don't fit into one neat system somewhere else. And if you think about it, most international schools have teachers that are from a variety of teaching backgrounds and certifications from around the world. So the blending can actually be a real coming together of the best of a lot of global perspectives and best practice ideas. So the key is figuring out whether the blend is international and structured or just thrown together.
A few smart questions you can ask here are, how do you decide on which curriculum guides each subject? How are assessments conducted and reported? And how do you make sure that students don't have gaps when they move between stages? Another good one is, what voice do students have in pursuing their interests within the curriculum framework that you have?
Yeah, if school leaders can clearly explain, we follow Cambridge for math and science, National Curriculum of England for English, and we assess all stages with standardized benchmarks twice a year. That's showing clear planning and thought.
Yeah, that would be a great answer. But if the answer is we use the best ideas from everywhere with no evidence of assessment or progression, those are warning signs. It usually means that teachers are reinventing the wheel, and your child might face gaps or overlaps in their learning too. Not to mention learning from a burnt out educational staff.
It's not good.
No.
Okay. Bottom line, for younger years, mixed curriculum schools can work really, really well if the blending is strategic and well monitored. But if it feels like a patchwork quilt with no clear stitching, you might want to be a little cautious.
Now, when we get into high school, the stakes totally change. At this point, transferability and recognition often become the number one priority for most parents.
Exactly. Okay, a mixed curriculum might work for a 5-year-old learning phonics, but for a 16-year-old trying to graduate and apply to university, it can be a real deal breaker at times. Universities look for clear, recognized qualifications, IB diplomas, IGCSEs, A levels, AP courses, or accredited high school diplomas.
Okay, and here's the thing. Not all high school diplomas are even created equal. An IB diploma or A-level scores are universally recognized. Cambridge IGCSEs are also widely respected. But if the school says we issue our own high school diploma, that can mean a lot of things. You need to know if their accreditation is locally accepted or specifically for the US or Canada, etc. Most universities have conversion charts, but still some universities won't even consider a child's application without additional qualifications like SATs or foundational years.
For sure. And that's where having a great college guidance center or careers counselors on staff becomes really important for a lot of international schools. They'll definitely promote this service and give you a lot of strong statistics about their graduates. And especially if the school is clearly focused on getting your student to the next stage of learning, which is university.
Right. So the questions for parents to ask of secondary schools are very different. Ask things like, what official qualifications will my child leave with? Mm-hmm. Or are those qualifications recognized by universities in the countries we may apply to? And okay, this one's really important. Do you offer more than one pathway for students? Because not every child thrives in a single rigid system.
Yes, this is 100% true. As a teacher and examiner for the IB myself for many, many years, I really thought my son, who had thrived academically throughout primary and middle school, would be the ideal IB-DP candidate, But once in the program, it just wasn't for him. Mm-hmm. In the end, he almost switched to the IB Careers program, but then that wasn't in our family cost budget. So it really ended up that he went and switched to taking 5 IB certificates instead and got the school offered diploma. So he didn't get the full diploma, but the school offered one.
Yeah, and that's such a good point because in many IB schools, for example, there's the full diploma program, but there's also a certificate route for kids who need more flexibility. In British schools, students usually specialize in 3 or 4 A levels, which works brilliantly for focused kids, but it can be limiting for those still trying to figure out their path. In American-style schools, AP courses are rigorous and open doors, but if APs are optional and your child doesn't take them, the standard high school diploma may not carry the same weight abroad.
Yeah, my son and I have discussed many times how maybe an A-level path would have been better for him, or an American high school curriculum where he could have had a lot more electives maybe would have been better rather than the rigid 2-year IB structure. It really comes down to knowing your child and what is best for them, not only what you imagine that your child should be in your head.
Yes, because in the end, it is your child who has to do all of the classroom seat time and all of the studying that's involved, not you. Yep. Sorry. It's always best when that involves catering to their interests and what brings them joy, at least in part, because otherwise it's going to be a long, grueling parenting fight.
Long and grueling. I can wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
You've been there.
If I had only known. Okay. So what should you listen for when schools answer this? If leaders or the admissions team walking you through can say, here are the qualifications we offer, here are the last year's exam results, and here are the universities our graduates went to, that's reassuring.
And instead, if they say broad, they're saying things in broad strokes, like our kids can go anywhere in the world without the evidence, that's a warning bell. It's like when someone says, oh yeah, I run marathons. And what they actually mean is that they jogged around the block once in 2015.
Hey, I really did that, Brandy. I told you. And I did it again in 2017 too. Seriously, no, don't just look at the hyped up success stories either, because good schools are great at marketing and promoting themselves, as they should be, Instead, ask, what support do you give to students during the exam years, and if you see things and answers like, we offer study skills workshops, counseling, structured university guidance, the school understands the pressures of those exam years.
Right. And another important piece for parents to consider is curriculum mobility. If your family may move during your child's high school, you'll want a program that's easily transferable midstream. IB and Cambridge are generally the smoothest, but if you're in the U.S. system, transferring mid-high school can get really messy, with credits not always matching up. That's when families sometimes find themselves repeating courses or scrambling to fill gaps.
For sure. And let's be honest, parents, this is also the stage where the Facebook bragging rights start creeping in. Every one of us suddenly becomes an expert in exam acronyms when their kids start to get to college. So behind those humble brag announcements, there are years of hard work, exams, and good counseling support. So make sure the school has the systems you need, not just the slogans.
Okay, so bottom line, in high school, recognition and consistency, they're not optional. They are the foundation of your child's university options. Ask to see the hard evidence, graduation requirements, exam offerings, and lists of university destinations.
And if you're still wondering, wait, what even are all those different curricula and how do I know which one fits my child? Pause after this episode and go back to episode 6, because that's where we broke down the IB, the British, American, Cambridge, Montessori, Waldorf, and so much more. It's basically your curriculum survival guide, and it'll give you the big picture context that you need.
Absolutely. So the green lights here, clear university pathways, specific examples of graduate destinations, and teachers trained in the program. Red flags, vague promises, no evidence of outcomes, and curriculums stitched together like a patchwork quilt.
Beautiful in theory, but potentially messy in practice.
Yeah. Let's talk about the official stamps of quality now, accreditation. Now, we know this can sound like a dry alphabet soup. CIS, NIASC, WASC, Cognia, BSO. It feels endless. But for families, accreditation is what keeps schools accountable. It means safeguarding checks have been done, that teachers are properly vetted, and that your child's transcripts will be recognized globally.
Exactly. Think of this as your school's health check. Just like restaurants get inspected for hygiene, international schools get inspected for quality and safety. Without it, you're basically taking the school's word for it.
Yeah, and this links back to episode 6. In that episode, we unpacked different curricula, and accreditation is what makes sure that those labels aren't just marketing. It's the difference between a school saying that they run the IB diploma and actually being authorized to deliver it.
And that's not just about academics. Accreditation bodies also look at safeguarding systems, how schools manage their student well-being, whether teachers are trained, and whether leadership is building a culture of accountability.
Yeah.
Okay, important. That's why it matters for everyone, from parents of 3-year-olds all the way up to parents of teenagers.
Right. And what's really reassuring is when schools are open about their accreditation process. Some publish their inspection reports right on their websites. And this is actually required by some inspecting bodies, especially in the UK. Others hold information sessions with parents after a visit. And that transparency shows confidence and honesty.
On the flip side, if school gets cagey about accreditation and talking about it, maybe they say something like, we're working on it, or they can't explain who inspects them or when the next inspection is coming. That should give you a little bit of pause. Sometimes it means they're brand new to the process and they haven't gone through it yet. But sometimes it means they're actually avoiding oversight.
So here's a little parent tip for you. Even if you don't remember the acronyms, because we never do.
We have to look.
Yes. Notice how the school talks about them. Do they explain clearly what each one means and how it benefits students? Or do they wave it off as an unnecessary detail or a hoop to jump through? A confident, well-run school will want you to know exactly how they're held accountable.
Yeah, and if you do want to go into the deep dive of accreditation, alphabet soup, we broke all of those down in episode 7, where we explained how each accreditor works and what they look for.
We also created a free resource for you, our Accreditation's Quick Guide, so you don't have to memorize all the acronyms. You can go find that over at connectedglobal.org or in the show notes. It's a simple, parent-friendly breakdown of who's who and what it means for your child.
That's right. The bottom line, accreditation isn't just paperwork. It's proof that the school has opened itself up to external eyes and agreed to keep on improving. For families, that's peace of mind. For what you want to see in the brochure and making sure that it matches what's actually happening behind closed doors.
Right. Okay, now let's move on to what you actually see on your tour of a school, the facilities.
Ooh, parents often get dazzled by those Olympic-sized swimming pools or the Broadway-worthy theaters. And sure, those are nice, yeah. But the truth is, your child probably won't spend much time swimming laps or performing under stage lights.
Yeah, but what matters more are the class sizes.
The sizes.
Student-teacher ratios as well, and whether the school has the proper support services.
Yep, and this is paramount in the younger years, especially the class sizes, because class size and ratios are everything there. You really want to know how many adults are in the room, and are they trained teachers, or are they just assistants? And 24-year-olds with one overwhelmed teacher can be a recipe for chaos.
Oh, yes. And trust me, I know that.
You know that.
I've been that teacher who's been in the recipe for chaos. The gold standard here is smaller groups with multiple adults who don't just stand around, but actually engage with the kids.
Yeah. Another thing to notice is the preschool or elementary classroom set up for independence. Are materials at the child's eye level? Can students choose activities freely? Do you see cozy reading nooks and interactive displays? This shows thoughtfulness in design, not just a Pinterest perfect classroom.
Yeah, and don't forget support services at this stage are also important, especially at elementary level. Does the school have speech and language support? In preschool, this could be a staff member that speaks the national language to help the little ones settle in. But for elementary, that could be an EAL teacher or an EAL department.
Yeah, check if there's a counselor who's visible in the early years of primary, and those are really hidden gems that matter a lot.
But by the time the kids get older and they transition into middle school, the focus shifts yet again. Now class size isn't just about crowd control, it's about whether students get personalized attention in academic subjects. So in a math class of 15, the teacher probably knows who's coasting and who's struggling. But in a class of 32, that nuance can disappear.
Yeah, facilities play a bigger role here too, but again, not in the Instagram way. A science lab that looks spotless and has no sign of experiments today is basically like a photo op, right? Yeah. A real lab has actual posters on the wall, projects drying over there in the corner, and maybe even that faint smell of vinegar from yesterday's experiment.
Love that vinegar smell. And this is the same with tech. Schools love to say state of the art, but we're a bring your own device school. But ask yourself, do you actually see kids using devices in meaningful ways? Or, are they opened up and kids are left to roam free on computers everywhere you look? It can be terribly tempting for a child to be off task when teachers aren't looking. Say, for instance, in the library. These are things to look out for. And to be honest, if the Wi-Fi doesn't work for you as a guest on a school tour, there may be a tech issue. And if there's only one printer, but it breaks down every week, everyone suffers.
For sure. Honestly, I think teachers secretly judge their schools by how reliable and accessible the printers are.
Yes.
Forget the Olympic pool. Give teachers a working color copier machine and, morale shoots up by 50%.
We're easily pleased.
Easily pleased.
And parents, just be thorough and ask about the various support staff in secondary. Are there college counselors, learning support teachers, and mental health resources? A school can have a multi-million-dollar gym, but if no one is helping students navigate exams or stress, that gym, it won't fix anything.
That's right. Bottom line, when you're touring, focus on what will impact your child daily. The class size, the library work zones, the lunchroom food choices, the feel of the classroom, the up-to-date authenticity of bulletin boards you see, whether the tech supplies actually work, and the presence of real human support.
Those are the things that shape your child's experience, not only the number of seats in the auditorium or how many lanes are in the pool.
One of the biggest frustrations parents share in expat forums is poor communication with schools. Okay, let's discuss the parent-school partnership for a few minutes. It's not about the academics always. It's about knowing what's happening from day to day at the school.
Yes, and communication has two sides. First, how the school keeps you updated about your child's progress in school life. And second, and I would say this is the part that a lot of schools miss the mark on, is how the school listens to you and integrates parent feedback into what they do.
For the first part, updates. Strong school systems have clear systems, That might look like a weekly newsletter or an online parent portal with homework and grades or regular parent-teacher conferences. The key is consistency. You should never feel like you're guessing when the next update will come. Does my child have swimming today?
But weak communication, that's when you only hear from the school if there's a crisis. Your child is in trouble, there's a last minute event, or, that last email lands at 10 p.m. asking for costumes tomorrow. That inconsistency wears parents down fast.
And there's the second piece, parent voice. Okay. The best schools don't just tolerate feedback. They actively invite it.
Right.
They send surveys to you. They host parent forums. They meet in parent associations. And here's the crucial part. They actually act on your suggestions.
Yes. Look for examples where parent input has made a difference. Maybe parents pushed for more after-school clubs and the school expanded its program. Or maybe families suggested a better pickup system and now traffic is smoother. Those are signs of a school that values
all day long. They value it.
They value partnership and not just the tuition costs.
Yep. A school that ignores parents can quickly become an us versus them environment. A school that listens and adapts and builds a community where families feel ownership and trust is key and something you want to look for.
And let's be honest, expat parents love their WhatsApp and WeChat and Line groups. But if the school doesn't communicate well, those non-school sanctioned chats, they will fill the gap and not always in a healthy way. You don't want the playground rumor mill to be your main source of information.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Strong, transparent communication will absolutely stop the rumor mill before it starts. Okay. And when leadership is approachable and teachers share regularly, families spend less time speculating and more time supporting their kids.
Right. Bottom line, look for consistency, clarity, and responsiveness. The best schools not only talk to parents, they talk with them, and they make visible changes when parents raise good ideas.
Another big question families often ask is, will my child belong here?
And that's not just about language or academics. It's about the culture of the school, including diversity and inclusion. Look at the student mix. Is it mostly one nationality, or does the school celebrate a real balance of cultures?
Yeah, some schools are true expat bubbles. Everyone's from abroad, everyone's here temporarily, and others are more mixed with local families, and some are majority host country and with just a sprinkling of internationals. None of these setups is automatically bad.
Right.
What matters most is whether your child feels welcome and included in those scenarios.
Right. And you'll see this in the small things. Are multiple holidays acknowledged? Diwali, Lunar New Year, Eid, Hanukkah, Christmas? Do classroom displays reflect a range of backgrounds or just one? Do teachers pronounce names correctly and encourage students to share their home cultures?
Yeah, events can also be a clue. A true celebration of diversity goes beyond the food fair and flag parade. If the school's only evidence of multiculturalism is International Day once a year, with samosas on one table and sushi on that one over there, that's a bit more tokenism than it is inclusion.
Definitely, because, yes, we all love a good food fair, but if that's the only time that diversity shows up in your school, that's surface level. If in a genuinely inclusive school, those values run through the curriculum, assemblies, class projects, even sports teams.
That's right. Another big indicator is how your new students on a campus are welcomed. Do they have buddy systems? Are their teachers proactive about integrating kids into groups in classrooms? We've both seen schools where new kids were shadowed and supported from day one, and others where they were kind of left standing alone and alone at recess for a few weeks. One thing I've seen that was just amazing, my school in Thailand had a student-initiated project called the Buddy Bench, where if a kid was feeling sad or left out, they could go and sit on the bench, and then classmates would have to keep an eye on the bench to see if they could go and help and include them. And it was such a special idea, and it actually really, really worked.
That's really sweet. And parents, don't forget that this also affects you too. Some school communities they're famously cliquey, and sometimes families stick together in their cultural backgrounds as the language integration is easier. But that can leave you isolated from others. So remember, you want to feel like you belong as well, and that parent associations are approachable, that information is shared openly, and that families from all backgrounds are invited to participate.
The best schools have cultures where difference isn't just tolerated, it's celebrated. You can see it in the way the students collaborate, the way the teachers highlight multiple perspectives in their teaching, and the way leadership talks about inclusion.
Bottom line, real belonging for students and parents in a foreign country at a new international school. It's not just a one-off event. It's an everyday rhythm of the school.
If you can feel that inclusivity worn and woven into daily life there, and not just on the calendar highlights, that's when you know your child will thrive there.
Once the bell rings at 3 p.m., school life doesn't actually stop. And for many kids, the most memorable part of the school happens after the last session, which leads to our next piece, extracurriculars.
Woo, I know this was my favorite part in my Minnesota education. And for most kids, extracurriculars really, really do matter. This is where kids discover passions that they didn't know they had. It's where they can take risks. They can do theater, robotics, debate, sports, model UN. Balanced program in sports, arts, music, and service builds your child's confidence and gives them an outlet beyond academics.
Right. And so for the younger ones, extracurriculars are mostly about exposure and fun.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it as a chance to try things out. A term of swimming, a term of art, maybe a language class or dance. At this stage, it's less about specializing and more about building confidence, coordination, and friendships.
The best schools offer a variety of these opportunities and make them feel like an extension of the school day. They're playful, hands-on, and inclusive. If every activity comes with a hefty price tag, or if options are limited to football or nothing, families can quickly feel squeezed.
And parents, you'll know this already. After school time also makes or breaks your family routine. Programs that run reliably until a set time are a lifesaver. Programs that get canceled last minute, let's just say nobody wants the surprise 2:30 pickup call.
That's so true. Yikes. Reliability matters just as much as variety when you're talking about younger kids. And a school that doesn't remember, your school doesn't have to offer 150 different activities. I've worked in those places and it's exhausting and choosing for students and parents, it's too big, too many choices, the most popular ones quickly fill up right away. And sometimes staff are required to do a club, but that has very low student interest. So it's not always a great thing for staff morale either to have so many choices.
Right. And in middle and high school, extracurriculars, they take on a completely different weight. And now they're not just for fun. They can shape identities. They can build leadership skills and even strengthen university applications.
Yeah, universities love to see commitment beyond academics, whether it's years on a sports team or involvement in service projects or leadership in student government. Strong schools know this and intentionally build robust programs and give teens lots of opportunities.
And can I just say, this is personal for me. My parents had one rule when I was in high school. I had to do at least one extracurricular, but I could choose whatever I wanted to do. And because Trish was my English teacher at the time, and I kind of liked her, I guess, I signed up for her speech and debate club, which she coached.
And that's right. And we ended up spending countless hours together after school practices, Saturday tournaments, and traveling to competitions across the country. So honestly, that's how our friendship started about 25 years ago.
Exactly. And here we are years later, literally building connected together, all because of the quality of an extracurricular program.
That's right.
That one activity literally changed the trajectory of my entire life.
And for me, I was in everything in high school. My parents didn't have the one rule activity. They probably wish they did. But the one that made the biggest impact for me was art club, which did an annual summer trip to Europe. And we visited top art galleries. And that's where Mrs. Fossen, we gave her that shout out in episode 1. Here it is again. First ignited my traveling flame. And I've still been doing this international teaching abroad for over 20 years now.
That's why in high school, extracurriculars, they shouldn't just fill time. They should start bridging school life into real world experiences.
And whether it's competitions, performances, service projects, or leadership roles, strong programs give teens the chance to step outside the classroom and practice skills that they will use forever.
So the bottom line, in the younger years, look for breadth, exposure, and reliability. But in the older years, look for variety, leadership opportunities, and extracurriculars that actually connect to the wider world. Because sometimes the right after-school activity doesn't just build confidence, it can shape your child's entire future.
Just like it did for the two of us.
Yeah. So for parents of older kids, the final big question is, where will this school take my child?
And this is where graduate outcomes matter. Strong schools don't just teach academics, they also guide students towards their next steps. That could mean university counseling, career guidance, or building alumni networks that students can lean on after graduation.
The best schools are proud to share this information too. They'll publish data on where their graduates go. They'll list university destinations and sometimes even highlight the different pathways that a student can take. Not just the kids who went to the Ivy League or Oxbridge, but also those who pursued art schools, gap years, or vocational programs.
Exactly. And transparency is key. Like a school that shows you, here's last year's graduating class. Here's where they applied to. Here's where they went. Here's how we supported them getting there. They're giving you a clear picture of the value they provide.
But on the other hand, if the answers are vague, like our students can go anywhere, or if they only highlight a couple of success stories without sharing the bigger picture, those are warning signs. It usually means that the data is not consistent or the outcomes aren't as strong as they want you to believe.
It could be for data protection, but likely not.
That's a good point.
Another thing to look at is like how early the college counseling starts. Like, do they wait until the senior year to talk about universities? That's too late. Or do they begin in middle school and like help students identify key interests and strengths? Schools that start earlier really do help students make smoother transitions and less stressful choices during those final exam years.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the alumni networks. I did. Some schools create strong connections between current students and graduates through mentoring, career days, or alumni visits. That can be incredibly valuable for teenagers who just need to see real-life examples of what comes next.
And parents, remember, the best pathway isn't always the most prestigious name. Okay? What matters is a fit for your child. A strong school will help your child find a university or next step that aligns with who your child is, not just what looks good on a brochure. I know I've hinted at my own son's path a few times now in episodes, and after graduation, he was just so burnt out by studying and by the IB that he was determined to take a gap year or 2 or 3 or a lifetime, however, and then he just wanted to go and get some work experience at my sister's farm in Maine. But after just 3 months of living and working in the US, like he quickly realized he needed to study further if he was going to make some money in this world. So he signed up for an associate's degree, and it's going to get him into the welding and home building arena, which he absolutely loves.
Yeah. And is that what you originally thought for him?
No, definitely not. Especially not given my partner and I's like education backgrounds. Like it was absolutely perfect for our son though. And as he's a hands-on, clever problem solver who will likely open his own manufacturing company or something one day.
And I know him, he probably will. Yeah. But the bottom line here is it's about knowing your child and recognizing that the school's potential graduation outcomes, they matter, but so does the honesty behind them. So look for schools that proudly share their graduate destinations, provide robust counseling, and celebrate all types of success, not just the headline-worthy, high-scoring ones.
Yep. And if you need help sorting through all the different options and curricula, remember that we went deeper into this in episode 6. So that's your survival guide to help you understanding the different systems and how they connect with future pathways.
Okay, so let's bring it all together. Today we looked at what really makes a school great for families.
Yep, we started with well-being and safeguarding, the foundation of safety and trust.
And then we moved into language and integration support because transition is everything in an international schooling setting.
Yep, and then we tackled curriculum delivery and recognition, plus accreditation for global accountability.
And then we reminded you to not be dazzled by the facilities, but instead to ask about class sizes, support systems, and community culture.
Finally, we explored communication, diversity, extracurriculars, and graduate pathways.
The takeaway, a great international school isn't the one with the biggest football pitch. It's the one where your child feels safe, supported, and able to thrive.
And that's what we all want as moms, right?
Definitely.
That's it for today's episode of Connected Conversations. Thanks for joining us as we unpacked what makes a school great for families.
If you want a handy guide, download our school quality checklist for parents, linked in the show notes or always at our platform, connectedglobal.org.
And remember, That's also the place where you can book a personal consultation with us. If you'd like to chat through what you're seeing on school tours or how to weigh the options in front of you and any other questions you're considering as you navigate international education.
We'd also love to hear from you. What's the biggest red or green flag you've spotted on a school tour? Share it with us in the comments.
If this episode helped you at all, please pass it on to another family or leave us a review. It helps more of us get connected.
So until next time, may your school tours be honest,
your safeguarding policies be clear,
and your child's learning journey be joyful and international. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is like, can I bring it closer without it?
You can. Is this enough for you? Do you want me over this?
Yeah, no, I think, no, you come back because then I will.
Me come back.
And then
there we go.
Bye-bye.